I used to think that the day my son got married would be the day I was finally rewarded. After so many years of raising him alone, after thousands of sleepless nights, filled with fevers, deadlines, and silent tears, I truly believed that the moment Ethan stood at the altar in his wedding suit would be my proudest. And that day I came, bringing with me all of my heart. I booked a flight from another state 2 days early. I wanted to be there in advance to lend a hand. In my suitcase was a dress I had sewn by hand over many nights, a soft lavender color with a modest design. I had also wrapped a wedding gift myself, decorated with lace ribbon I had crocheted. It was a wooden photo frame I had once used to keep pictures of Ethan from his childhood up until his college graduation. I thought if they just looked at it, they'd see Mom has always been here walking beside you with love. The taxi dropped me off at the wedding venue, a luxurious resort nestled on a mountainside. The late afternoon sun cast golden light on the stone steps. I got out, dragging my small suitcase, my heart pounding, not from exhaustion, but from nervousness. I stood at the entrance for a long while. No one came to greet me. None of the event staff looked my way and smiled, saying, "Are you Ms. Miriam?" like I had hoped. I told myself they must be busy. I arrived earlier than expected anyway. I pulled my suitcase inside. The reception area was beautifully decorated. A young woman was busy arranging the seating chart. I approached her gently and asked, "Excuse me, miss. I'm the groom's mother, Miriam. Could you please tell me where my table is?" She glanced at the list, then frowned. "Miriam, please wait a moment." She flipped through a few pages, then looked up a little awkward. "Ah, here it is. There's a Marion listed. Must be a typo." I smiled patiently. "Yes, probably." She pointed toward the bottom of the chart. "Table 19 near the kitchen entrance." I froze. The kitchen, yes, near the kitchen area and the staff's side entrance. I bowed slightly to thank her, then rolled my suitcase away. No one led me. No one said, "Let me help with your suitcase." No apology for the name error, not even a friendly glance. I, the groom's mother, was just another misplaced guest. The path to table 19 was winding and isolated. Along the way, I passed the main hall tables, adorned with fresh flowers, scented candles, and white satin chairs tied with gold bows. Each table had a polished nameplate. One read Ethan's college friends, another said Juliet's colleagues. I walked past each table, searching for a glimpse of my son, but saw nothing. Ethan didn't wait for me. He didn't call, didn't ask if Mom had arrived. Table 19 was exactly where the girl said, right beside the side entrance next to a large stainless steel trash bin. The chairs were plain black plastic, no covers, no ribbons, no floral arrangements. On the table there was no name card for me, no welcome note, no one else seated. I stood there. My heart clenched. The smell of food drifted from the kitchen mixed with the disinfectant scent of the trash bin. I took a deep breath, forcing it down. Then I sat in the empty chair, like a shadow invisible on my son's most important day. I sat looking out at the grand hall. Every table buzzed with laughter. Everyone had someone to talk to clink glasses with, to share joy. Quietly, I took the wedding gift out of my suitcase and placed it on my table. No one noticed. No one asked. I saw the groom, Ethan, step onto the stage. My eyes lit up. But Ethan looked straight ahead, not around, not searching for his mother. I heard the speaker's voice boom. "Let's welcome the bride and groom." Applause erupted. I clapped too. My hands trembled. My heart felt heavy. Ethan walked with Juliet, radiant, flawless. I had once wished to hug Juliet sincerely and welcome her as my daughter-in-law, but her eyes skimmed past me, as if I didn't exist. When the family introductions began, the MC called out the tables bride's family. Table 1, groom's relatives, table 2, best friends, table 3. There was no table 19. No one mentioned me. I silently clenched the hem of my dress, the one I had stayed up countless nights to sew. I once thought I'd be proud to wear it. Now all I felt was emptiness. An hour later, while everyone toasted the couple, I stood up. quietly. No one turned around. No one asked, "Where are you going?" No eyes tried to hold me back. I stepped through the side door where the smell of disinfectant still lingered. I left the small gift on the table. No farewell, no one to see me off. I walked away, not out of anger, but because I realized I no longer had a place in anyone's life. I still remember those early years, when Ethan was just a tiny boy, curled up in my arms, his wide eyes full of wonder as he looked out at the world. I remember the smell of milk, the damp scent of his hair after every bath. I remember the sleepless nights, rocking him through fevers his cries when teething, and those rare moments I got to sit down after back-to-back shifts that drained every ounce of my strength. I was a single mother. Ethan never knew his father. That man left before my son could even utter the word dad. From then on, I became both mother and father. I juggled daytime cleaning jobs and nighttime shifts at a restaurant. I used to think nothing could tire me more than those years until Ethan started growing up. I took Ethan to school on an old bicycle, holding an umbrella with one hand, his tiny hand in the other. I went to parent-teacher meetings alone, standing quietly in the classroom corner as other mothers arrived in pretty dresses adorned with jewelry. I had nothing but love, as thick as the calluses on my hands, like the thread I used to stitch his old shoes so he could have something warm in winter. I never expected Ethan to repay me. I only hoped he would remember. Everything began to change when Ethan started college. I cried tears of joy the day we received his acceptance letter. It felt like all those years of sacrifice and hardship had finally borne fruit, but I didn't realize that moment would also mark the beginning of a distance between us. The phone calls came less and less. First it was, "I'm busy with school," then, "I've got a group project," and eventually, silence. I still sent him food, still reminded him to sleep early to stay warm. But on his end, there were only short responses calls that ended quickly. Ethan changed noticeably after he met Juliet. Juliet, a girl who looked like she'd stepped out of a movie. Everything about her was perfect, golden hair, flawless skin, a smile that was just enough, neither warm nor cold. On social media, she posted photos of elegant brunches and polished pictures with Ethan captioned with short, icy phrases like matching energies. I didn't know what that meant, but I could feel the distance. The first time I met Juliet, I tried to smile, held out my hand. She nodded politely, eyes glancing past me like I was a worn-out object. I invited her to stay for dinner, a stew Ethan used to love. She called it interesting, and I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a polite dismissal. After that day, Ethan began to retreat from my life. I wasn't asked when he changed jobs or moved apartments. On holidays, I received automated texts, no emojis, no pictures. One year on my birthday, Ethan sent me a single sentence, "Wishing you happiness." Happiness with whom? In this empty house, Juliet never once called me Mom. She spoke with a formal, distant tone, even referring to me once as Mrs. Miriam. When I offered to help plan the wedding, I received a reply not from my son, not from Juliet, but from the event coordinator's assistant. A stranger. They said everything was already planned and finalized. I looked at the wedding presentation slides. I wasn't in any of the photos. There was no space allocated for me to say a word. When I asked Ethan, he replied, "Everything's been simplified for a modern look." Simplified. What could possibly be more stripped down than a mother's love? I pretended everything was fine. I booked my flight, hand-stitched a light purple dress for the big day. I wrapped a gift in handmade paper tied with a carefully chosen ribbon. I still hoped, until the very last minute, that my son would embrace me and whisper, "Mom, I still remember." But I was wrong. My absence wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. A cold, calculated choice, one that didn't need an explanation. I sat there at the table near the kitchen beside the trash bin, reflecting on the journey I'd taken. I used to be the first person Ethan saw each morning, the last one to soothe him to sleep every night. And now I was nothing in his eyes. No introduction. No place in the wedding album. Not even my correct name on the invitation. The question kept echoing in my mind. Am I still his mother? I sat at the table near the kitchen, a nameless table without flowers, without candles. just a cold, hard plastic chair and a shiny stainless steel trash bin beside me. The faint smell of disinfectant made me nauseous, but it wasn't the scent that turned my stomach. It was something rising from deep inside my chest. No one looked at me. No one asked if I needed anything. They passed by as if I were part of the furniture, or worse, a nuisance pushed into a corner. I tried to smile, a twisted, broken smile. The servers walked past without stopping. I held a half-empty glass of water, lifting it as if I were part of the celebration when really I was just trying to keep from falling apart. The wedding began. Juliet walked down the flower-covered aisle like a goddess stepping out of an Instagram post. Every eye was on her, as though everyone was enchanted by her perfection. I looked at Ethan. My son stood at the altar beside the officiant. The boy I once lulled to sleep with lullabies now stood there like a stranger. Throughout the ceremony, his eyes never once glanced my way. Not a single nod, not even a faint smile. No sign that his mother was even present in that moment. I wondered, did he see me sitting there next to the trash bin? For a second, I thought my heart stopped beating when Juliet's father stood to give a speech during the reception. He began with an emotional voice. To become a great man, it takes people who raise God and love him from the very beginning. I clenched my hands, lifted my head, feeling a spark of hope rise in my chest. He continued, and today we should give thanks to people like Mr. and Mrs. Miller, his music teacher, his third-grade teacher, and especially Juliet's family who have stood by Ethan and shaped him into the kind, wonderful man we see today. I froze. Not a single word about his mother, not a glance in my direction. No one stood up to correct him. No one noticed the omission. No one thought to mention the woman who had spent her life as a single mother, scraping together every penny so Ethan could go to college, the one person who should have been acknowledged. I faded into the party lights like I didn't exist. I looked around the table. No one was seated beside me. An empty chair, a visible form of being forgotten. I tried to swallow my tears, not out of pride, but because I knew that if I started crying, I wouldn't be able to stop. No one invited me to the family photos. No one said my name during the speeches. The wedding slideshow played on the big screen photos of Ethan as a child, Ethan in college, Ethan with friends, co-workers, and Juliet on luxurious trips. But not a single photo of him with me. I remembered carefully sending in treasured pictures, one of me holding him as a newborn, one of us laughing while baking, one of him holding his graduation certificate while I stood behind him, hugging him tightly, but none of them made it in, as if I had never been a part of his life. Even the wedding invitation I received had my name wrong. Miriam Carlstone, when I am Miriam Carlston. Just one letter, but I knew it wasn't a typo. It was carelessness, a sign that I no longer mattered. I still keep that invitation in my wallet. I had meant to tear it up when I saw the error, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's evidence of being cast aside, of a pain so quiet that no one bothers to notice. The party went on. People toasted, laughed, danced. I stood up. No one noticed. I walked out of the banquet hall. Slowly, each step as heavy as stone. One hand clutching the wedding gift. I had wrapped myself a gift no one had opened, one no one even asked about. I reached the lobby where the flower bouquets had already begun to wilt in the corners. I stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away. I hailed a taxi back to the hotel. In the back seat, I watched the city blur and rewind behind me like a film on rewind. I saw myself in it, small, pitiful, wearing the dress I had spent 3 months sewing, carrying the belief that I was still part of this important day. But I was wrong. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything. I just sat there silent, my heart splintering into pieces that no one could hear. Back in my room, I changed out of the dress, washed my face, and sat by the window. I asked myself, am I still his mother? Or have I been replaced by faces easier to accept, by names that better fit the life he's chosen? I used to think being a mother was a sacred role, eternal. But it turns out in some stories the mother is just a side character. Sometimes she's even cut from the script. That night I slept with the light on. Not because I feared the dark, but because I was afraid I'd disappear completely in it. I never thought the day would come when I'd return to the house I spent my whole life building, only to feel like a stranger. The flight home after Ethan's wedding felt longer than usual, not because of the time, but because my heart felt drained. That emptiness, that feeling everyone says will pass, eventually quietly clung to every breath I took. I unlocked the door with trembling hands. The familiar scent of old wood and candle wax rushed to my nose. But this time it didn't bring warmth. It was merely a reminder that I was alone. And maybe I had been alone for a long time without daring to face it. I set my suitcase down in the hallway, not bothering to drag it into the room. I stood still, gazing vaguely at the living room. On the shelf was still the photo of Ethan in 5th grade, messy hair, innocent smile, eyes gleaming like the whole world belonged to him. A world where I was once the center. I passed by his room. My hand rested on the doorknob, hesitating for a long time before opening it. The room had barely changed since the day Ethan left for college. The light blue wooden bed, the wall covered with old action movie posters, and a desk cluttered with aged textbooks, all covered with a thin layer of dust, silently bearing witness to an unspoken distance. I stepped in and sat on his bed. The mattress let out a soft creak like a tired sigh. I opened the small drawer beside me and found it an old notebook, my mother's journal I used to write in. With shaking hands, I turned the pages. Ethan's first day crawling. The day Ethan first said Mom. Ethan's first day of school, he cried, clinging to me at the gate. The day I had to skip my morning shift to attend a parent-teacher conference. The day I borrowed money to pay for his last year of high school. Each line felt like a gentle blade across my heart. Not out of regret, but because I realized I had spent my entire life recording every step my son took while he couldn't save me a seat on the most important day of his life. I held the journal to my chest. My tears fell without sound. Not the cry of disappointment, but of a mother who had lost a role she once thought irreplaceable. I buried my face into the pillow he once used, its faint scent still lingering. In that moment, I wasn't a 70-year-old woman. I was a 35-year-old mother again, hunched over riding a bicycle through the rain to get him to school. A 40-year-old mother staying up all night when Ethan had a fever. A 50-year-old mother selling her wedding ring to pay for his college tuition. And now, I was a mother unmentioned in a speech invisible in the wedding album, not once met with eye contact by her son during the entire ceremony. I sat up, wiped my tears, and I did the only thing I knew how to do to face the pain. I wrote. I opened my laptop and created a new blog account. I titled my first post, Mothers Who Are Asked to Step Out of Their Children's Lives. And I wrote, not to blame, but to survive. I recounted every small moment, from the receptionist's confused look when she couldn't find my name on the list, to the moment I sat beside the trash can, listening to the bride's father give thanks without once mentioning me. I didn't write with hatred. I wrote with the voice of a mother, honest, wounded, struggling to find herself again. I posted the piece just before midnight, thinking no one would care. But the next morning, I woke up to over 300 shares, then 500, then thousands. Messages poured in. My mom went through the same. I'm a single dad. My daughter got married and didn't invite me. Thank you for putting into words what we've never dared to say. I read each message, hands trembling, not from pain, but from emotion. I wasn't alone. There were so many fathers and mothers out there who had been silently pushed out of their children's lives. That day I didn't cook. I didn't clean. I just wrote. Wrote for those who had been forgotten. Wrote for people like me who once believed they were the foundation, only to discover they were just remnants. That evening, I lit a small candle in my son's room, now my writing sanctuary. I placed an old photo of Ethan on the desk next to the journal we once wrote in together, when he was learning to compose poems as a child. I looked at the photo and smiled. You don't have to look back, I whispered, because I'm learning to look forward. I don't know where this blog will take me. I don't expect Ethan to read it. But one thing I know for sure, I have found my voice again. A voice that no longer depends on being invited to sit at the table, no longer waits to be named in a speech. A voice strong enough to rise whether or not anyone listens. I had hope. Even if I had to leave in silence, even if I sat beside a trash can, even if no one called my name during the celebration. I still had hope. Hope that after the wedding Ethan would call, that my son, though caught up in his role as the groom, though swept into a new life, would still remember his mother. A phone call, a message, an apology, anything. Just something to show he remembered I was there that day. But no. The next day, the phone stayed silent. A week later, still silence. I opened social media not to torture myself, but because of a gnawing curiosity. And there were the dazzling photos of the wedding. Juliet posted an album full of smiles, fresh flowers, and moments with her parents. A bold caption stood out, "A perfect day. Nothing could ruin it. A perfect day. Nothing could ruin it." I stared at those words as if someone was clawing at my chest. Me, am I that nothing? I kept scrolling. Photos of Ethan hugging Juliet, photos of them clinking glasses with her parents. Not a single photo of me. No photo of me in the purple dress I sewed myself. No photo of me quietly sitting at table 18. No photo at all, as if I had never even stepped foot there. I laughed, a dry, bitter laugh. Not because I was sad, but because I had been so naive. I used to think my child was just careless. But no. He chose to turn his back. It was intentional. It was a decision. A silent, complicit agreement from Ethan. And the most painful part, I still love him, as deeply as the day I first held him in my arms. I didn't write Ethan a letter. I didn't call. I didn't want to be the one to reach out again, not when the other person had long since withdrawn. Instead, I began writing for myself. I sat at the old dining table, the one where Ethan used to do his homework as a child, and opened my laptop. No need for fancy words, just simple, honest sentences, like gentle knocks on the pain still living in my chest. I titled the piece, "Mothers Who Are Invited Out of Their Children's Lives." I posted it on my personal blog, a place I'd previously used just for the occasional diary entry or a few photos of trees and leaves. I never imagined the post would spread so quickly. Within 2 days, hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, even children. Everyone had a story to tell. An elderly woman in Michigan wrote, "I understand. I too sat in a corner watching my daughter-in-law cut us out of every celebration." A father in Texas left a comment. "My daughter invited me to her wedding but referred to me as 'that guy' to her friends. It hurt so much." A young woman confessed, "I used to be cold to my mother, thinking she was just interfering." After reading this, I realized how small I was. I read every line, every word, through tears. Not tears of self-pity, but tears of connection. I was not alone. I wasn't the only one invited out of my own child's life. I began to write more often, to remind myself that I still exist, to affirm that I don't need anyone to validate my presence in this world. I wrote about working double shifts, about cooking 3-course meals from just $10, about holding Ethan through stormy nights when he had a fever that wouldn't break. I wrote about calloused hands, about the dream of resting, a dream I never dared to chase. I wrote because it was my way of reminding myself, I have lived, I have loved, I deserve to be remembered. One day, a small publishing house emailed me, asking if I'd consider turning my writings into a book. I haven't answered yet. I don't know if I'm ready. But I do know this. I'm no longer the quiet woman at the edge of the banquet. I'm the one standing up. Each word, each line, is one step I take to reclaim myself. Ethan still hasn't called. Juliet still posts her happy photos. But I've stopped waiting. I still remember my son. I still love him. But that love is no longer a burden. That love is now a small flame, warm enough to keep me going but no longer consuming me. I step onto the balcony and gaze at the purple twilight sky. A breeze brushes through my hair. I close my eyes and wonder, will Ethan ever read what I've written? I don't know. And for the first time, I no longer need to know. I used to think this house was nothing but an empty shell, a relic of years gone by. Every corner, every old pillow, even the creaking sound of the wooden floor held the shadow of Ethan, my only son. But then I realized, because every inch of this place still breathes with memory, I couldn't let it rot away in sorrow. One Sunday morning, after countless days of lingering with cold tea and the darkness within me, I flung open the window of Ethan's room. Light poured in, and time's dust lifted into thin layers. I took a deep breath, then quietly stepped into the room I had avoided every day. My son's room was just as it had been, a crookedly hung sports poster, his old backpack tucked under the bed, and the comic books he once adored during his teenage years. But it no longer felt the same. There were no more pounding footsteps, no more mischievous laughter. Only me remained, the mother who once thought she'd forever stand on the sidelines of her child's life. With all the courage I had, I gathered the clothes he left behind, the unfinished books. I folded them carefully, as if bidding farewell to a part of my past. I dusted the room, replaced the curtains, laid down a warm, earth-toned rug. I added a bookshelf and a small lavender pot by the window. And finally, I placed a wooden desk by the spot with the best sunlight, a study corner just for me. I transformed that room into a personal library, a space where I could read, write, and reflect. On the very first night sitting there, I wrote on the first page of a new notebook, Miriam, 58 years old, learning to live for herself. Day 1. And from then on, I never stopped writing. My first entries were recollections, Ethan's childhood, the first time I became a mother, the day I sewed his shirt for his very first school ceremony. The times I collapsed at the kitchen counter from exhaustion, yet still made sure he had dinner. Those memories remained vivid, but they no longer dragged me down. They became anchors to lift me up. I shared my writing on a personal blog titled, Mothers Who've Been Written Out of Their Children's Lives. At first, I thought no one would read it, but within a week, dozens of comments poured in. You wrote the words I never dared to say. I thought I was the only one going through this. It's been 4 years since my daughter last called. I was no longer alone. I, a small-town woman with no tech skills, had found my community through words. Some were mothers and fathers, others were grown children who had once turned away from their parents. They came to share, to apologize, to promise they would do better. For the first time in years, I felt I had a voice. I no longer waited for Ethan to speak in order to validate my existence. I had already validated it myself. I started waking up earlier, brewing fragrant coffee, putting on soft music, and writing. Some days I could only manage a few lines. Other days I wrote from morning till noon without feeling tired. Writing became my new breath of life. I also joined a church book club. At first I was shy, new faces, awkward handshakes. But each meeting helped me step further out of the fear of being forgotten. I shared my favorite books, my reflections, and even introduced my blog. One day, an older woman held my hand and said, "Thank you for writing. You don't know it yet, but you're healing many hearts." Her words felt like magic. I began teaching art to children every Saturday. Their mischief made me laugh again for the first time since Ethan's wedding. One child asked Ms. Miriam, "Why do you always draw the sun?" I replied, "Because the sun never stops rising, even when you can't see it." And for the first time in over 20 years, I traveled alone. I chose a quiet beach in California, bringing only a backpack, a journal, and a camera. I walked along the shore, collected seashells, and wrote in my journal, "I'm still here, and I'm alive." That trip marked a turning point. I didn't need anyone to come with me. I didn't need anyone's permission. I was free, and I promised myself I would never give that freedom up again. I was standing in my familiar kitchen, a steaming cup of tea in hand, when the phone vibrated. A hesitant buzz. No saved name, just a string of digits I once knew by heart but hadn't seen in a long time. I set the cup down, staring at the glowing screen like it was a knife to the heart. My fingers trembled as I pressed answer. "Mom." That voice. It was Ethan, for the first time since the wedding. I didn't say anything right away, not because I was angry, but because in that moment I was no longer the mother who lay awake waiting for her son to come home. I was a woman who had learned to sleep well, even when no one texted her goodnight. I was wrong," Ethan continued. His voice was shaky, hoarse, like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that if I said nothing, he would fall. "Can you forgive me?" I took a deep breath. "Ethan," I replied slowly, gently, like an old lullaby. "I forgive you, but I won't go back to being someone's backdrop." I have a life of my own now. There was a long silence on the other end. Not discomfort, surprise. It was the first time my son had heard the voice of a mother who no longer begged for familial love. I used to believe that being a mother meant sacrificing everything, always keeping the door open, always ready to embrace, always willing to forgive even when shattered. But I was wrong. Being a mother doesn't mean erasing yourself. It doesn't mean letting others define your worth by their presence or absence. I had waited for Ethan's call, quietly hoped for a birthday message, a simple check-in. Lied to myself that he was just busy, that Juliet just needed time, that the family would eventually be fine. But time is an honest mirror. It showed me that sometimes people don't forget you, they just choose to put you outside their circle of priority. I no longer blame Ethan. The anger faded with the long nights of self-reflection. Now there's only a quiet sadness, like when you look at an old photo and realize the person in it isn't you anymore. A week after that call, Ethan came to visit. He stood at my doorstep holding a bouquet of peonies, the kind I used to grow. Seeing him, I didn't burst into tears like I once imagined. I simply smiled calm and steady, like greeting a beautiful afternoon. "I miss the smell of home," he said softly as he stepped inside. I nodded. "The house is the same, only I've changed." We sat in the living room. No tears, no blame. Ethan told me about the honeymoon, the dog they'd adopted, the arguments with Juliet. I listened, not as the mother who once ached for her son's return, but as someone who'd learned to love her child without depending on his response. "I read your blog," he said, eyes staring into the distance. "I didn't know you were so lonely." I smiled. I wasn't lonely. I had just lost myself for a while. I don't know where this relationship is headed, but I know this: I no longer live waiting to be seen. I've seen myself. After Ethan's visit, I kept writing, kept teaching art, kept living a life where I choose my own direction every single day. I was invited to speak on a radio show for middle-aged women. They wanted me to share my journey of healing. I said yes. Then one day, I booked a ticket to Ireland, the place I once dreamed of visiting in my youth. I didn't wait for anyone to join. I didn't tell Ethan. I just packed a small backpack, a journal, and a deep belief in freedom. Now I'm standing on the cliffs of Moher, the wind lifting the hem of my dress. The ocean roars below. In my hands is the final page of this journey's journal. My son, I used to believe that the mother-child bond was unbreakable. But now I understand, like any bond, if not nurtured, it can break. I don't write this letter to blame you or to ask anything from you. I write so you'll know I've forgiven you. But I've also chosen to love myself. If one day you're ready to be friends with me as two independent people, no expectations, no labels, I'll be here. And if not, that's okay too. I no longer wait for anyone. I've learned to stand on my own in this big, wide world. I closed the journal, smiled. This isn't a sad ending. It's the ending of a journey back to myself. I, Miriam, am no longer the woman seated next to a trash can at her son's wedding. I am the woman standing amidst ocean winds, eyes, blazing heart wide open. No longer needing approval, no longer needing to be chosen. I have chosen myself.